Hello, and welcome back to a very special episode of Rewatching Home Movies, a weekly watch-along podcast where traditionally three friends break down the 1999 animated series Home Movies. Well, this episode is a little different. We're going to be releasing my interview with animator, editor, and storyboard artist David Sanangelo. David was nice enough to talk to me. It was such a fun conversation, and he's such a great guy. I learned so much about home movies, and I can't wait to share this interview with you. So, enjoy my interview with David Sanangelo. Hello and welcome back to Rewatching Home Movies. I'm here with David Sanangelo, a storyboard artist from Home Movies. David, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Tim, you're very welcome. I'm honored.
No, the honor is mine, please. So I have a handful of questions here. The very first question I want to ask you, and please again, David, take as much time as you need on this. I want you to tell me your story. Let's start at when you first kind of fell in love with the arts and how that inevitably led to your working on home movies.
Well, I was drawing since I think I was around 2.
Wow.
And I just remembered my one of my grandparents, he would pick me up from nursery school, and he wasn't very good at watching me. He would just sort of like plant me in the grass, and he would take naps. So I would just draw him. And I would I would draw him in different poses. He would also send me to go buy him Winston cigarettes down the street. And I was 4, walking around with money in my hand, and everybody seemed to be cool with this.
This was like back in that day where you could just show up with money and a note from your dad or grandpa.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, here you go, little kid.
And then with the change, I would buy myself some Italian ice and walk home, and we were all happy. So I started drawing then, and then I got into comics and everything else that kids usually do, cartoons, and I was just really into storytelling, and I was going full speed into illustration. But my art teacher in high school, she kept saying, you should also consider animation. And at the time, the only animation was Disney, and I'm like, well, I don't want the job of just drawing Simba's eyes, like
Right.
like that. I want to be able to do different things, and I was just intimidated by the level of Beauty and the Beast and all that. And at the time of in art school, I had taken every art class by my junior year, so my art teacher invented classes just so I can keep taking them. She would say, how about this and this? And she bought this Disney animation software, and there was like one computer in the art room at the time, and she put it in the supply closet. And I was a student of one with the software, teaching myself this like early 90s Disney software. And it was awesome. And I was making like animated videos for my friends, and that was cool. And then I still went to college for illustration. And then while I was still in school, a friend of mine who had graduated the year before called me up and said, hey, I'm working for Mercer Mayer, the guy who does Little Monster, Little Critter books. And we're taking these old books and we're animating them as CD-ROMs. I think you'd be great at it. And it was like the animation was calling again. So I was like, yeah. So I started doing that while I was still in college. And then again, just was like, okay, back to illustration. So I went back after that, and I worked for Mr. Mayer for about 2 years, and did some voices for him, and just wrote a lot of like silly jokes. If you clicked on a monster, something would animate. And then my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she wanted to move to Boston. We were in Connecticut, and so she had a teaching position all set up, and I had nothing. But I had nothing going on in Connecticut either. And I always loved Boston. So I'm like, let's go. Let's do it. And I remember I was trying to do, again, the illustration thing. And there was 1 week where I was like, nothing's happened for me. And I applied at an art store just to sell art products till I figured something else out. And that week, I ended up going to a friend of a friend's party. And I met a guy by the keg, and his name was Paul Santucci. And he was the audio engineer for Dr. Katz.
Okay.
And we hit it off. And he said, we were just making each other laugh the whole night. And he said, I work for Dr. Katz, and we're always looking for new artists. And I said, that's great because I have no job. So the next Monday, I just showed up to just see Paul, and I brought my portfolio, and they hired me. They hired me on the spot. Wow. And it was great. And they had one more position open, and I got the job. So that was awesome. That was fate, Tim. Fate.
Yeah. Because there seems to be that Dr. Katz to home movies pipeline.
Oh my God. Yeah. And it was amazing when I was first there, because they were just starting to work on home movies. It was like in early development. And it was originally called Tom Snyder Productions. Mm-hmm. And then eventually became Soup to Nuts.
Right. But
while Chris Georginas and Kim O'Neill were working on the initial designs for home movies, the Dr. Katz team was there. And it was just amazing being around them. And there was also teams. One of the teams that I was on, what was the show? It was, I think it was eventually called Squiggle Vision. It had Science Court.
Science Court, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was Science Court. And I was on that toward the end of that's run. And then I was on a show called Dick and Paula Celebrity Special. And it was all sort of based off of the brilliant Dr. Katz template of, let's stick these really funny people in Boston in a booth. Mm-hmm. And have like a bare bones outline of what we want to do, and just let them go crazy.
Yeah. And
then that's how they came up with the stories. And then they would give the Dr. Katz audio to the animators. And I remember Tom Snyder saying this to me once when I first met him. He's like, the way I like it is, the art team don't mess with the audio, and we don't mess with the visuals. And it was like the two didn't, they were separate. So like anything that the art team wanted to do, Tom loved it. It was like, let him go crazy. And Annette was the art director of Dr. Katz, and she was just brilliant. And then we started using this template for Dick and Paula, for Science Court. Now those shows had to be scripted a little bit, but everybody went off script. I think because of the science aspect and making sure it had some sort of value to children.
Yeah, and accuracy to an extent. Yeah,
and accuracy. Yeah, and that was it. And that was I wasn't on the first five episodes of home movies. That's the
UPN 5.
The UPN run. Yeah, I remember when I was on Dick and Paula, I was just watching what the team was doing, and I'm like, oh, this show is just amazing. I loved it. But I was very happy with Dick and Paula. That was a very cool show. And then there was this break. It was like home movies got canceled from UPN, and it just shocked everybody because we all thought it was so good.
Yeah.
And it was the first time something like that, like Tom Snyder had this run of just hits. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time something was canceled. And he was like, wait, what? And I forgot there was this bit of a hiatus. And then that was the birth of Adult Swim. And they were like, we'll take it.
Yeah, I believe it was.
It
was Khaki Jones who originally saw it on UPN, and then she was kind of tapped to make the first block of Adult Swim, and she's like, "Hey, I got this wholesome little show." So that's awesome. So you were aware of it when it ran on UPN, but you weren't working on it.
No, I was definitely there for. We would have watch parties. Definitely when they would run the the first episodes, and then whenever time an episode ran, we had like little watch parties, and it was just great, and I loved it. And I just always loved just the whole, Brendan making movies with his friends was just like, oh, what a great idea. And obviously, McGurk was just the funniest character I'd ever seen. And I just wanted to be a part of it, but I was on a different show. Right. And then I remember, I think it was when it started to ramp up where, it's coming back. We need some of the artists on home movies. I remember, I think it was Damon Wong, he's the big star of the animation part of home movies, as far as I'm concerned. He always did like the high end animation for home movies. Yeah. And we were both always trying to do really cinematic things. And he goes, I think you need to come over to, our side, our team. And I'm like, I would love to do that. And somehow it happened. I moved over. Eventually everybody did, because Dick Apollo got canceled. But I was one of the first ones to come over. And my first episode is still one of my favorite episodes, the director's cut.
Nice. Yes. That is a classic.
Love it.
We love that episode so much. That to be the first one to come in on.
Oh, I mean, I think from top to bottom, it's so solid. It's so funny. And even like during the rewatch, I was like, oh, wow, the Coach Drew thing, that was like a D plot. Like there were so many things going on in that episode.
Yeah.
Just so many storylines. I thought they were all terrific. And I was like the metal guy. I was really into always drawing the band, and they let me, and they were like, I don't think I even had to beg for it. They're like, take it. And I was, so I got to do all of the Franz Kafka stuff.
Yes.
And, I have friends to this day. When I run into them, they start going into the rock opera.
Yes. Yeah. Well, when this podcast was conceived, anytime I would speak to any of my friends who are also huge fans of the show, and I would be like, if you were to like be a guest on one episode to talk about, and a few of them were like, dude, director's cut, Franz Kafka, rock opera, let's go. Like that is the one. Wow. Such a good episode to come in on. So with you coming into the show, you were already familiar with the show beforehand. It seems like you were kind of a fan. Like, what was kind of the vibe when you went into home movies? Was it pretty much, similar to when you were working on the other shows, or did home movies kind of have its own kind of vibe about it?
That's a great question, Tim. There was a similarity because of just the way that all the shows were made in our studio. I'm sure Chris mentioned this. We had an audio studio in the same building, which was very unique because you would have these comedians coming in and out right next door, and we would just come over and watch them. And then once in a while, like they would come over and filter into our animation studio and watch us. And that just doesn't happen. So we all felt like we were all on this same team, which it had this, again, this very homemade quality to it, where you're not, sending something off to Korea to do one aspect of it and sending something else to Los Angeles for another part of it. It was all in house.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, we just had, communicate. There was no emailing. It was just, hey, Mark, what about this? Okay, Dave. Like we would just figure it out there on the spot, what to do. But what was different about home movies was Brendan and Lauren we would meet with them at the start of every episode, and they would give us like their take. We would listen to the audio together. And when we would do our storyboards, we would all kind of get our scenes and we would like rough it out. They would come meet with us when we would show them. We would show them our take on things and get their opinions. And it was so great because it felt like we were just feeding off each other. And a lot of times you don't get that. Like you won't, like the creator of the show won't have anything to do with the storyboard. There'll be a director in the middle and producers. And the fact that we have the creators with us and we're all working together, I think just adds just different layers to it. And was also helpful because we had no time in the schedule. We were putting these things together in a matter of weeks, sort of like South Park.
Yeah.
So we were all working on the fly and with a ton of just excitement and adrenaline because we just loved what they were doing. And there's nothing like going next door and sitting on the couch with your sketchbook and just literally watching Melissa and John and Brendan just riffing. And you already have the script in our hands. And we know the script is good. But then they're inventing new scenes.
Right.
Just because John he'll just look at Melissa and he has to insult her in some way. And then she will say something back. And then he'll switch to Jason and hold his nose. And then he has another line. And it's so funny to watch. We used to get longer takes of the audio. And then I remember Lauren stopped doing it because we would hear all the stuff. And then we're like, why did you cut this line? What about this? Oh, it was such a great joke. And he's like, you guys were just so like in love with the stuff that I wanted to cut. I had to stop, playing it for you guys. And I always thought that Lauren was always so wise about that. He would always say, it's better to cut the best joke if it dismantles everything else you built, basically. Like, he was always good about that. But of course we didn't care. We were like, 23 and like, no, it's great. So yeah. And in fact, the first season when they gave us the audio, they would give everybody a little cassette recorder and they would give us all the audio individually with just a cassette tape. And that's how we would listen to the audio. And it wasn't until the second season when we all got Flash that we started getting everything digitally. And anyway, I noticed that you're on season 2 now.
Yes. Yeah. We're chugging along through season 2. Yeah. God, it's been such a delight for me just to go back because, if I'm being completely honest, season 3 is probably my favorite.
Mine too.
Just so many bangers. That's traditionally a handful of cherry-picked episodes in season 3 is what I use to introduce people to the show if they're not familiar at all. Your Guitarmageddon, Renaissance, just some absolute classics that, you can't really go wrong with. So it's been a delight kind of going back. Season 1 was probably my least watched season, as a fan before the podcast. And so now in season 2 to see for me, it's seeing the evolution of everything, the animation, just how the episodes come together, introducing the ABC plots, all of that stuff really kind of takes shape in season 2. So it's been quite a delight.
I agree. I just want to jump in real quick on season 2. We were all using Animator Pro. It was an outdated program when we used it. And I remember it was supposed to be not for broadcast use, but of course that's what they used for Dr. Katz. So we used it for this first season of Home Movies. And then we all, and I think this might have been through Chris because Chris was the Flash guy. Yeah. We switched over to Flash and we had like a 2-week ramp up where we had to we had someone come in and teach us Flash. And then they were like, okay, now animate season 2 in this thing you just learned. Oh, and I remember Aya, the art director, Damon, and I were like, what do you mean we're going to make the show look entirely different in season 2? That makes no sense. And we were really pushing back against it. And they're like, no, we're get ready because this is happening. And season 2 for me was always hard to go back and watch because you're literally watching all of us learn the program episode to episode. And I went back this week and I watched a couple and I was like, oh, like you see weird lines overlapping. Like we didn't know what we were doing. Right. But, and it was the first time, when we were doing the Animator Pro stuff, we were kind of working shot to shot and then giving those to an editor along with our storyboard and the editor would piece everything together. This was the first time because of Flash, we were basically editing our own scenes. And none of us knew what we were doing outside of Damon. So we were just like, is this a show? So that was interesting.
Yeah. Well, I know I did speak a little bit on that with Chris, and I think the thing I really expressed to him that I do want to relay to you as well is you probably watch this season 2 now with a critical eye and say, oh gosh, when he moves his arm, there's like a line that goes up. Stuff like that is honestly like what we personally find so charming about the show.
Oh, that's great.
One of so kind of the dynamic of the podcast is I'm obsessed with the show. I have been since it aired. I'm a little bit older than my co-hosts. Marcin had kind of stumbled upon the show when it was on UPN, like kind of channel surfing, came across it, and the animation style, the squiggle vision, not really his cup of tea. And then that was what I call Jason in his gross era. And Marcin was not a fan of gross Jason. So that kind of made him not be like, oh, I hate this show, but he, quickly turned the channel and never really gave it much thought. And then our third co-host, Adele, my fiance, had just never seen the show. So the dynamic is me simultaneously introducing the show to my fiance and then also kind of saying like, no, this is a great show to Marcin. Like, Jason is a good character. Let him evolve. Let him do his thing. So that's kind of...
He's not just snots.
Exactly.
He's more than that. Yes.
Yeah.
His layers.
So, and that's why I'm so excited to get into season 3 with them, because I'm like, you guys have no idea what's coming. No idea.
No idea. I mean, can I mention anything from season 3? I don't want to spoil it.
Well, no, I think that's okay. So this interview will drop between seasons 2 and 3. They just by being out in the world come across, naturally home movies, kind of memes, McGurk clips, stuff like that. So it's not like they're, have to be like, oh no. Yeah, I think it's okay if we talk about season 3, because like I said, that's definitely one of my favorite seasons.
Yep.
But real quick, so I have a question. When you started working on this show, and it seemed like you were a fan from the beginning.
Yes.
Did you have any idea the longevity of this show? The fact that 20-something years later, a random dude was going to email you and be like, hey, I'm making a podcast about this show you worked on half a lifetime ago. Like, did you have any idea that this show was going to have kind of the longevity that it's had?
No. In fact, I remember a buddy of mine knew a guy, and this is, I'm going to say it was like in 2000, 2001. He said, I know a guy who just got a Jason tattoo. And I said, that's a terrible idea. I'm like, it's not like you're getting Homer Simpson, I'm like, but here we are.
Right. And now I'm sure Jason tattoos, McGurk tattoos are, in the fan base, pretty common.
Yeah, and if you got it back then, that's like extra points.
Yeah, it probably looks like squiggle vision now.
I'm sure it does.
Well, David, what were some of your favorite cartoons and influences growing up?
When I was little in the 80s, we had, it was just so many cartoons. But I always kind of went back to, I just loved Looney Tunes. I remember just loving every cartoon that came out in the 80s, just like everybody else. But then I remembered there was this one version of Mighty Mouse that came out in the late 80s, and it was just insane. And I remember I just couldn't stop talking about this to my friends, and they were like, shut up. And I'm like, you don't understand. This show is genius. And years later, I realized it was John Kay and Ralph Bakshi who were like in charge of the show. And John Kay went on to create Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah.
And I when that came out, I'm like, oh, it's that guy who made that cool Mighty Mouse. So then I became obsessed with Ren and Stimpy. In fact, when my wife and I first got together, our first date, we started talking about our love for Bugs Bunny and Ren and Stimpy. And that's one of the things where I was like, that's it. He's the one. And then I felt like home movies had some of that DNA.
Yeah.
And I think because it was like after that, I went on to work in other studios and make other cartoons and realize, oh, this is how you're supposed to make a cartoon. But when we did home movies, like I was spoiled from the get-go because it was sort of like being in the greatest punk band, and like everybody was learning their instruments as they were recording the songs, and it was so much fun. Everything was fun because it was all new. It was like only I think a few people had actually gone to an animation school. Everybody else just liked to draw, so we were all just just sort of making each other laugh. And again, like the scripts were like outlines where it always turned out way different than when they walked into the booth. So there was just always this energy of improvisation on both ends, and I think that's what just made me love the show. And I think that's probably why people still love the show, because they're watching it and they're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Why did that scene just end abruptly, or what? Or just crazy things would just happen. And there was like one episode where I think it's when they were in the music store, and I think they actually had instruments in the booth and someone accidentally hit something, but because the mic picked it up, we had to figure out, okay, I guess that's happening in the scene. And it was just everything was happy accidents.
Yeah. Well, I think it's this perfect combination where it sounds like Lauren and Brendan were pretty good at kind of setting, where they wanted things to go and being like, yes, we're heading in the right direction. But then because of time restraints and everything else, it was very like, okay, now do it. Hands off. We're not. And I think that gives it kind of that little extra charm because you're learning as you're going. You don't really have a lot of constraints about people breathing down your necks or telling you, no, you can't do that, or no, we want this. And so I think that really adds to kind of the charm of the show and how just absolutely not just heartwarming, but then just absolutely absurd the show can be simultaneously.
Yeah. I mean, I just speaking for myself, like I would draw my friends into as extras into the background of episodes, and Brendan and Lauren they never micromanaged. It was all just like the big picture, and they let us all kind of just do our own thing. And some of that freedom was like, I got to do the nurse date episode with McGurk, which was one of my most favorite things that I ever worked on. And they let me just go crazy with I got to invent the whole the beer, the Black Hole Brew, and
nice
the band Scab. I got to the band name is Scab, and Brendan was like, cool. It just didn't care.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was just the freedom. We were all sort of just putting in our own little background jokes to our individual friends.
Yes.
I think you're right. I think that does sort of add to the charm of it. I know eventually, on the top of the show, you said that I was one of the storyboarders, and eventually I was. The early seasons, we all had our own scenes, and we did them from start to finish. So we were all storyboarding, animating, designing, and I think the season 2 again illustrates things will look very different from scene to scene. And it wasn't, I think, until season 3 that I think Aya, the art director, said, "You know what? I think the show should look a little more uniform." And that's when I think Damon and I think a couple others were doing the boarding, and then others were doing most of the animation. And definitely by season 4, we were trying to make it a little more cohesive in that way. But we all still got to put our own thing in. Absolutely.
So, David, I'm so happy you brought up kind of background stuff and adding friends. Yeah. I don't know if you're going to be able to see them. I'm going to send you 2 screenshots real quick through Facebook. 2 episodes in a row, there is a gentleman in the background who is, you see him sketching in the background. Is this someone who worked on the show, or is this a friend?
That's my friend, Mike Felsigno. He actually he's a horror expert. He actually has a horror podcast called Don't Open This Podcast. He also owns his own tattoo parlor in Connecticut. And he's a fantastic artist in his own right. And next to him, the gentleman in the gray sweatshirt is my friend Adrian Correa. And Adrian, I made a short horror movie back then when I was working on the show, and Adrian was the camera guy. He was my director of photography. Adrian now directs TV shows. He did one of the Walking Dead spinoffs.
That's awesome.
He did Kevin Can Go Fuck Himself. He did.
No.
Yeah. Oh, he's
Dude.
all over the place. He did. I think he did. Was it Game Show?
My fiance and I just started Kevin Can Go Fuck Himself.
It's terrific.
What an amazing concept for a show.
Yeah.
Holy
yeah.
cow.
And I was watching it with my wife, and I'm like, Adrian, that's his name right there. It's Adrian. And I was jumping up and down, and then I Facebooked them after that and congratulated them. And oh yeah, so that's them. That's those two guys. That's Mike and Adrian. My friend Jessica was the bartender during the nurse date. My wife has been in the show. My friends Jarrett and Tina were in the Renaissance Festival.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to, so if it's okay with you, when I do these episode breakdowns now, if I see a random background character, I might shoot you a screenshot.
Oh, absolutely.
And ask if this person is relevant.
I know.
I'm so glad I asked. I thought that the guy drawing was Damon Wong for some reason, and I'm so glad that I asked.
Damon might have been in it too. I forget. I know there in the episode where McGurk goes to the gym and he gets the massive pecs.
Yes.
In the background, running on the treadmills is a bunch of us. I don't think Damon's in there, but I'm in there. My buddy Phil, Pops, Big Guy. These are all of our crazy nicknames. We were all working on the show, and we used to all go to the gym together back then. So I'm like, well, we got to put ourselves in the gym. So.
Oh, we just did one of the season 2 episodes where all of those names showed up in a yearbook under like friends.
Ah, yeah.
Yep. That's so funny. Well, okay. So this is the big background question that we have.
Okay.
We have to ask, is there any significance behind the gnomes? Or are they just background catches to just be there?
Oh no, that was the thing. And I don't remember how it started, but it became a thing where like, no, there has to be a gnome in every episode. And we would all just get excited about like, who's going to put the gnome somewhere in this episode. And that was all like for the artists. We were all like just really excited about that idea.
Yeah. But that you know of, there's no like, oh, gnomes meant X, Y, and Z to me, so that's why we're trying to get them into every episode. It was just a fun background thing to throw in there. Again, I'm probably making this up in my head because it's been so long, but I think we like the idea that the gnome was alive and would just sort of like pop in from scene to scene and then just hold really still. Like it became its own character. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I brought this up to Chris. There were episodes where like it seems Brendan has a stuffed gnome that's either on his bed or that he sleeps with.
Yeah.
And there are times when Brendan's like cuddling up with the gnome and the gnome's got like a cute little smile on his face.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I
mean, we could say perhaps the gnome is Brendan's childhood. Or we could not say that at all.
Yeah. Or it's up for interpretation, really. The gnome is
exactly
what the gnome means to you. But yeah, it sounds like, the animators really enjoyed getting those fun kind of background things going on. What is your like favorite kind of background thing that you were able to get into an episode?
Tim, I think I would have to go with, and there's been many, I think Renaissance, because Aya let me take the entire battle of the sci-fi guys versus the Renaissance guys, and that was like my dream come true. And they let me just run with it, and I try to put in every reference I could think of for sci-fi. In fact, I still have a ton of old notebooks that and they all have Cartoon Network images on them that they would give us free stuff every year. and I have a bunch of like the initial sketches I did of like Melissa with the whole like Borg thing going on, and other sci-fi guys, and the Axe guy, like all my old sketches on that. And I was looking through that, and that was great. I loved like the kids trying to build the Voltron, and I think I got like Doctor Who in there. And, that was probably the most fun I ever had.
Yeah, that episode is probably one of my ultimate favorites. So yeah, kudos to you for getting all those references in, because I can't wait till I get to the breakdown of that one, because I'm gonna be just pausing and having a field day with that scene especially.
A buddy of mine, Steve Rogan, who worked on the show like a year ago, I think he somehow pieced all of it together and sent it to me, where because I have all these guys running back and forth across the screen, and he put them all together in this one giant line, and that was hilarious.
That's awesome.
I'm looking at the season 3 right now, and oh man, it's just this. Shore Leave is great. I think Damon's ending to that, where Melissa escapes from the fairy princesses.
That
just like, Damon he went crazy on that.
That episode, especially being the first episode of season 3, I think really sets the tone. Yeah. And I think at that point, and I've told this to my co-host, because we are at a point with season 2 where we're getting a lot of these episodes that have that, like I said, that ABC plot. Yep. And Shore Leave for me is such a special episode when it comes to that, because there's a point in the episode where literally and figuratively the A, B, and C plot run into each other.
Yeah.
And it's just so beautifully done. I think that really kind of sets the tone and the pace for season 3, and why it's, again, in my opinion, probably one of, it definitely is my favorite season. So do you have a favorite character in the show?
Ooh. It's a hard question. I think it's probably McGurk.
Yeah.
I feel like what's great about the show is it changed episode to episode, because sometimes there's a great Brendan episode.
Yeah.
And I'll just really connect with him, or a great Jason. Like I really understood Jason with the candy, because that was me as a kid, where I would eat too much candy and go nuts and then annoy my entire family. And so like I connected with him a lot on that. But and I love Dwayne. Like Brendan and I loved the metal, and he could actually play it, so we kind of geeked out together on that. So I always loved the Dwayne stuff. But and again, Melissa in the Fairy Princess episode, I feel like she stood out. Like that was like, ooh, this is like the Melissa episode.
Yeah.
But I think if I had to pick one character, I think I got to go back to McGurk. Just the fact that he's hilarious, but he's just so tragic. He's always home alone watching TV by himself.
Yeah. The
5 o'clock shadow gets really dark sometimes, and he's just always drinking. And I think as I get older, he becomes the character. I'm like, I really see things from your perspective more and more, John McGurk.
Yeah. Well, it's been very interesting approaching McGurk with a podcast, especially with having my fiance on, and as as a co-host, and getting the female perspective on some of the stuff John McGurk has to say has been very interesting. But luckily she understands that this character is kind of a commentary on people who think and act like this. It's kind of holding a mirror up to that kind of person, and not this guy is genuinely feels this way about women. But yeah, McGurk is a very, very interesting character. So
I remember like this was one of the first episodes that I, because I didn't work on it, but when I heard that he was going to date Brendan's mom, I was like, that's a great idea. Like, yeah. Oh man, what a way to set up the show.
Right.
That was terrific.
Yeah. That really, kind of, I think it set a tone for, Brendan and Coach's relationship especially when Coach showed up for the date and Brendan was just messing with him so much.
Exactly.
So I have this question, but it sounds like I kind of already know the answer now. As someone who worked on this show, sometimes artists tend to not consume the product that they create, but it sounds like you were a little bit of a fan of the show before you started working on it. So am I wrong? It sounds like you have no problem kind of going back and revisiting some of these episodes.
No, in fact, in preparation for this, when I went back, I'm like, oh, it was like an old friend that I hadn't talked to in so long. And I still remembered the lines so clearly in my head. And no, I was a massive fan of the show before I even worked on it. And I think most of us were, as we were working on them, we just loved the show. There was just this love. And I think that permeates through the scenes and just from, the brilliant actors on the audio side, and everybody just loved it. We all loved this thing that Brendan and Lauren created. And we were all just happy to be part of the family.
That's awesome. I mean, and genuinely, like, I feel like that really reflects in the show that everyone involved with this show seemed like they were doing it coming from a place of like passion and genuinely caring about the show. It really didn't seem like it was like, it's another paycheck. Let's get this out there. I think because, there is an underlining thing that the show is actually about something, right? I mean, people understand divorce and single mom, the alcoholic soccer coach, there's these flawed characters, and we all like Fenton. I knew a kid who was my Fenton, and his mom would call my mom, and my mom would set up play dates, and I wanted no part of this, but like she would make me go, and like so when I would get those scenes, I'm like, I know what this is. Like I know exactly how Brendan feels in this situation, and I think that was it for everybody. Like we all could like gravitate to these characters. There was something about them that reminded us of other people in our lives. So it was just easy. Absolutely. And I think that's really the relatability of the show is so deep. Our co-host Marcin is a filmmaker now. And, obviously when he was young, he could relate to Brendan from the aspect of when Brendan's talking to Scab about Starboy and they're trying to give him, suggestions, Marcin's sitting there like, he's in post-production, man. What are they doing? And it's like, I would never look at it from that, that point of view. So so much of the show is relatable, I think, to so many different people for so many different reasons. It's just, it's such a great show. Let's see. This next question, it's kind of a big one. So, again, take all the time you need for it.
Okay.
When doing some breakdowns of early season, I think it was mid to late season 1 episodes, I was watching an episode with commentary, and Brendan Small had made a comment about, at that time when he was recording the commentary, about how people, now at that time had so many different tools kind of at their disposal. And I feel that now as time and technology has evolved, that has only become more and more true. So if someone was interested in getting into art, illustration, animation, just any kind of art in that realm, what would you recommend as a good starting point for them? Let's just say I have an iPad or a laptop. Where would you recommend they start if they wanted to get into illustration, for example?
Let's see. If they wanted to start a career in illustration,
or at the very least, like dabble, see if it's something they could get into
as a profession. So what I would do is, and actually I have switched back now finally to illustration. So I have not animated anything in years, and I'll tell you exactly what I did, which is if, for instance, if you want to do children's book illustration, there is something called the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. It's called SCBWI, and they're all over the country, and like every state or group of states has its own chapter, and they meet throughout the year. And you join a chapter, And it's like that's how you meet like-minded people who are all trying to do what you are trying to do. And you all just help each other. And during these events, professionals come and meet with people and have different kind of events. It might be something that's hands-on that you're all working on, like a project with one of these professionals as a mentor, or it just might be them doing like a TED Talk type of thing. But you're learning the industry and you're networking. And that's how I got in, because I remember thinking I finally was like, no, now I want to get into publishing. How do I do this? So this is what I did. And at the time I was like, I don't know. Like all I knew was animation, and publishing was a completely different beast. And this is how I learned about it. And I think with animation, it might be something, I don't know that they have that sort of thing, but if I was trying to get into animation, I think I would probably start going to festivals, going to events where sometimes studios do local events where they'll show, like I'm in Georgia right now, and there's a lot of shows that were made in Georgia, like Archer, different bento shows, Aqua Teen, and they would do events where they would just have people like it might be a Dragon Con situation or a Comic Con, and then you just network while you're there. Everyone's very available to talk to. You could show people your reel, you could show them your portfolios, or just do what I did back in the day, which is you go to a party and you hang out by the keg and you meet a guy who is already in the business, and you hit it off. So kids out there, don't stop going to parties.
I think that is the biggest takeaway from all of this. Now, David, what, after you worked on home movies, because that show ended 20 years ago.
Yeah.
What have you done since then?
After that, through Soup to Nuts, we did other shows. Like we did Assy McGee on Adult Swim, Word Girl, which was on PBS. And I always thought that was hilarious that we would work on, PBS shows, teaching kids words. But, I'd also draw naked ass shooting people on Adult Swim. And we did a number of shows through Soup to Nuts. Then I left. I went to Bento Box in Atlanta. And I worked on The Awesomes, which was a Seth Meyers show on Hulu. And then I did some storyboarding for Future Worm, which is a Disney XD show. I also, through my friend Danielle, we worked on, this was amazing. She got this gig to do an animated special for the Boston Red Sox. And Danielle produced it. I got to direct it. And it was for their mascot, Wally, the green monster. And awesome. That was so much fun to work on. And Danielle put together this crew of like, everybody was like either from Boston or had lived there a long time. And it was a very Boston-y situation. And she got a lot of voice talent that was from Boston. And that was great. And we went to Fenway for a meeting, and we got to walk around in the dugouts, and they told us the grounds crew meticulously made the field perfect. And don't step on. You could step on sort of like the dirt area, but don't go on the grass. Well, I'm directing. I'm taking pictures of Fenway, and I'm backing up, and all of a sudden I hear, "Get off the grass!" And I have the entire Fenway crew yelling at me, and that was awesome. And then that night we watched a game in a suite, and all of a sudden the owner's wife shows up and gives us this amazing tour of Fenway. And there's gardens on top of it. I had no idea. She's like handing us strawberries from the gardens of Fenway. And then we came out, we met the co-owners, and I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. And I think since then, I think that was the last actual thing I did animation wise. So I'm like, it's not going to get any better than this. Again, This is all from me meeting a guy at a party and then going on this weird and wild animation ride. And I'm like, okay, I think this was a lot of fun. I'm going to now finally go back to illustration. And that's what I'm doing now. And in terms of illustration, I illustrate the stories for R.L. Stein's Steintingler series. Oh, wow. I'm a huge horror fan. Like Lauren is a huge horror. We would always talk horror movies when we worked together, because he's a big nut. In fact, I think I don't know if he's ever mentioned this, but Bob's Burgers originally was about zombies. It had nothing to do with what it became.
Yeah, I had heard some. I don't know if it was like a weird internet rumor, but something about like because there was a morgue next door that the possibility of them making burgers out of human meat was part of a storyline. I know it was part of a pilot episode.
It was something like that. I think that was the original idea for the show, and then it just the horror part was removed. But that's where he usually starts with horror and then I think works backwards. And I'm recently signed to a new a literary agency, Pen and Ink Literary, and my agent is Irje Diek. She lives in France. I have never been, but hopefully I'll join her soon. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm all about the illustration, and I still meet up with friends who are in animation, and they're loving it.
That's awesome.
They're lifers.
Yeah. Are you still in touch with anyone from the Home Movies cast or crew?
I saw Aya a couple of years ago, the art director.
Yeah.
And Mark Usher, aka Big Guy. I saw them a couple of years ago. And a few of us, like, we'll still, we'll like, write each other on Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't really see anyone because I moved. A lot of them are still in the Massachusetts area.
Yeah.
But I feel like this show, it's one of those things where, there's different things that you do in life that bond people. And sometimes it's trauma where everybody has like the worst job ever. And because of that, they're friends the rest of their life. I feel like Home Movies is the opposite. We all were part of this amazing thing that we all just loved so much that it'll just always be, it just connected, the way that we're just bonded by it for the rest of our lives. And it was just great. It was just a great experience. In fact, when I saw Marston's email a couple of months ago, I just jumped out of my seat when I saw Home Movies. I'm like, Home Movies? Are you kidding me? Yes.
That's so awesome. I'm really hoping too. I mean, if you have any suggestions, I'm hoping maybe I can score another interview with somebody who was part of the show who would be so willing and enthusiastic to talk about it like you and Chris were. Yeah.
I'll give you names.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. That would be awesome.
Absolutely.
So this is a question I have for Chris, and he wasn't super sure, and we've had kind of our theories, and we've heard some things in commentary, but to the best of your knowledge or recollection, do you know if the show is supposed to take place in any particular state, or if it's just like a Anytown USA kind of deal?
I don't know. Yeah. I think I want to say it's Anytown USA.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm trying to like imagine all the, like, again, it's when everything's drawn in the background is just, blocks of color and with very little detail. I think it's anywhere, but you'd have to ask Brendan and Lauren. I'm not really sure. Yeah. Is there snow? There's a snow episode, isn't there?
So the closest thing I think we get to snow is when Paula accidentally painted the snow scene when it was supposed to be a summer scene. I don't think we've seen, trust me, we've talked about this extensively on the podcast, and I do have some personal theories, but I'm just trying to see if anything lines up with.
I don't know. Yeah. It's weird.
No, I think it's okay. I think it's okay to especially a show like this, I think setting it in a kind of Anytown USA makes it a little bit more relatable for people.
Sure.
So I don't want to get too wild with my theories here, but
go crazy with it.
Yeah. Well, we did. So I do these episode breakdowns for each episode of the podcast, and I'll freeze frame. I'll stop on stuff. And I think the first thing we got was a car with a license plate that said 007 space FL. And when we saw that, we were like, does that FL stand for Florida? And
I have no idea.
Yeah. My co-host Adele, her thing was like, well, I don't remember seeing any palm trees. But then this was the big one, and I don't know, this was through commentary. We're talking the episode where McGurk moons his landlord and leaves his place while Eric is trying to help him find a new place. And one of the first spots they check out It's got the balcony, it's got the pool, it's got, all that. And in commentary, Lauren said, like, oh, this is supposed to be like Miami. And I don't know if that meant a place like Miami or if that's supposed to be like, Miami. I don't know. I like it better thinking, you know what, it's just Anytown, USA. I don't think we need to pinpoint a location to it. I might be reading way too much into a silly animation from 20 years ago, but that's kind of my job as of late. It's been fun.
I want to go back. I want to find that license plate now.
Oh.
It might be something that, again, it's a reference to something crazy that's got nothing to do with Florida.
Exactly. Some kind of 007 Florida, like a Florida James Bond reference. So
it's you never know.
Exactly. So, well, I think, David, that's a great place to kind of leave it. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thank you again so much for doing this.
Oh, Tim, you're very welcome. This was such a pleasure.
Yeah. So yeah, I will, like I said, in the future, if I see any background characters or catches that catch my eye, I might send them your way for a little insight.
Oh, please do.
I appreciate that. And then
if I can answer your question, I will find the person who probably can.
Oh, that is a huge asset, David. Thank you so much. And is there anything you want to plug or promote before I let you go?
No. I've got nothing right now. Yeah, I want to plug this show.
Aw.
Rewatching home movies.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate that. When I did the interview with Chris, a couple of days later, he said, "Hey, I'm going to check out your podcast." And I'm like, "Oh, please don't do that." He got back to me a couple of days later. He's like, "I absolutely loved it. I love your guys' dynamic together." Because at the end of the day, this is genuinely three really good friends just talking about a show about three really good friends, So.
Oh, yeah. I listened to some of it. And you think you were quoting a doctor? And about how everyone, like just trying to like get through hard times. And
oh my goodness!
And I was like, yeah, I love this. I love what we're going with this.
Yes. Weirdly enough, that was a fellow podcaster who reached out to me by the name of Dr. Adam, who has a Sister Wives podcast, who just is like, man, I love home movies. It's, one of my favorite shows. I love your podcast. And funny enough, when I made a post about that particular episode, and my sister-in-law messaged me, and she's like, I love that podcast. I listen to that podcast religiously. To see this kind of weird crossover is very mind-blowing. So, yeah, it's all like so super surreal. Just even getting to talk to you and Chris has been, far beyond what I ever imagined this podcast would turn into. So, again, thank you so much, man.
I just love that you're keeping the dream alive.
Of course.
I will get you more names.
I appreciate that. I will definitely keep in touch if I have any background catches or anything like that. So thanks again, guys. David Sanangelo of home movies fame, animator, storyboard artist. I mean, it sounds like you guys did a little bit of everything. So thanks again for speaking with me, David.
Thank you, Tim. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let's go. Guys, that was such a blast. What a great dude. That was so much fun. Yeah, I'm sure we'll record an intro, outro, all that fun stuff. That's it. Thank you so much. That's going to do it for this episode of Rewatching Home Movies. Join us next week for a Season 2 recap. Thanks again to David Sanangelo for the interview, Shannon Conway for the refresh of our logo, and Chris Bongat for the use of our theme song. If you liked what you heard, check out our Linktree at Linktree/RHMpod. There you can like, follow, and subscribe. Send us an email or leave us a 5-star review. I will read 5-star reviews on the podcast. On behalf of myself, Tim, and my co-hosts, Martin and Adele, thank you for rewatching home movies with us. We'll see you next week. Bye.